Alright, here we go. Chapter 7, Section 2. Another attempt at this video. Hopefully this audio is a little better. What we have here is STS. STS is setting the stage. Remember, there was 500 years between the Mauran and Gupta empires. At this time, there was mass chaos and troubles during those 500 years. Multiple groups invade and bring with them new ideas and customs. And remember, we always talk about new ideas, customs, new trade routes, everything, and definitely new religion. First thing we're going to talk about is changes in religion. Buddhism. Originally, Buddha stressed that each person could achieve something called nirvana. And nirvana is, it's an ultimate enlightenment, and you receive in nirvana by rejecting everything around you and just embracing pure spiritual discipline. Eventually, Buddha dies. Many different ideas on how his teaching should continue. Many people started to believe that you could become Buddhist by giving up the idea of nirvana and save humanity by doing good deeds and self-sacrifice. So, instead of having this thing of rejecting, the sensory world, hold on, we're good.
Oh, we're good?
Yeah, I'm going to use this one.
You don't even have any
Okay.
USB mics, so.
Thank you. All right, sorry for that. But, now many Buddhists are yes, I put it right there that Buddhism is a religion, but it really isn't necessarily a religion. It's more of a philosophy or an idea. Many Buddhists are now promoting individual discipline, but with this new idea, you're going to be disciplined, but you're going to be able to give, good deeds will help you achieve more statement of enlightenment, or nirvana, if you want to call it that. Once this starts to happen, it becomes a very popular. Once this happens, it starts to become a very popular religion. Your salvation through good deeds. Multiple people start to believe this, and so it starts to become more popular. As a result, two groups start to emerge. The Mahayana, they are the ones that are accepting the new ways of Buddha, the good deeds way. And then you got the Theravadis, who are wanting to stay true to the original teachings of Buddha himself. So the ideas of self-sacrifice. Also, all these new trends help change Indian art. You start to develop more, religious themes. You start to get a large Buddha. Large statues of Buddha and everything. So Indian art changes as a result of all this. Hinduism, like Buddhism, Hinduism is very remote to people. It's very difficult. It's a complex religion, if we're going to call it religion. Most of the things can only be performed by priests because it's so complex. People have a less connection to it because it's so complex, and it's just not grasping the people. So because of all these new cultures, Buddhism's popularity, Hinduism has to change. So they change in many different ways. They start to lean a little more towards monotheism, but they still have hundreds of gods. What their idea of monotheism was really more of a single divine force than a single divine god. But they have various gods representing that force. We've talked about these before: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; and Shiva, the destroyer of life. All these are of life. Indian culture, so religion went under changes, so did the culture of India. You have literature and arts change. You have Kalidasa. He's one of India's greatest writers. He's most famous for writing the Shakuntala, just some great stories of India. You also start to have schools develop, or writing academies develop, and this is where they were teaching people how to write. There's still some 2,000 Tamil poems that still exist from this academy. Tamil is just another group within this Indian empire. You don't really need to know much about them. You also start to develop drama, or plays. People that travel around and perform many different plays. Men and women perform in these plays. It's a combination of dance and drama. So it's really essentially the first, musicals. You also start to develop astronomy, math, and medicine. You know, the Western world, Rome is starting to decline, but luckily the Eastern world, the eastern part of Rome, and also, you know, the Indian developments help preserve literature and learning and everything. You have an expansion of trade, and this trade leads to a growth of science. Sailors on the oceans need to know how to navigate, so they start to use stars to help them navigate, so astronomy is becoming bigger. Calendars started to develop on the cycles of the sun instead of the moon. You have start to develop 7-day weeks. 1,000 years before Columbus, Indian astronomers are proving that the Earth was round, and they did this by watching a lunar eclipse. The shadow of the Earth went across the moon, and they realized that they could see the arc of the Earth, so they started to realize that the Earth was, you know, round. They also started to develop new mathematical numbers, including zero and decimals. I can never pronounce this guy's name. Aryabhata calculated pi to within 4 decimal places, which is pretty dang accurate for back then. And he also determined how long a year is within a few hours. There was, at this time, also 1,000 diseases discovered. 500 plants for medicinal purposes were discovered. Surgery and plastic surgery was developed. You also had the spread of Indian trade. India has always been rich in goods. They've always had spices, diamonds, sapphires, gold, pearls, fancy wood, beautiful woods. So let's talk about overland trade between East and West. All these invading groups that we talked about just a few minutes ago, they helped to spread Indian trade, you know, because now they start to realize that the Silk Road is there. And, you know, once they realize the Silk Road is there, that first of all, the Silk Road, y'all should remember, it's a trade route where Chinese silk was being traded between that and Rome. And, you know, so there was the Silk Road is what we call it. Once they knew of the Silk Road, they realized that they could make a lot of money by being this middleman. What they would do, they would buy all the goods coming out of China and sell it for a profit to all the people needing those goods in the West. So it's like a middleman. It's kind of like today, even there's middlemen today. You know, whatever product you buy, there's usually a middleman. You also start to see, let's talk about the sea trade between the East and West. Once again, the oceans were used to sell the goods to Rome. Africa was also being traded with. You know, African ivory was being traded for Indian cotton, some of the finest cotton in the world, still to this day. China was also involved in the oceans trade. Silk was traded for Indian cotton, Indian monkeys, parrots, and elephants. I have no idea why, but it was. Effect of the Indian trade, increased trade leads to the rise of banks. Bankers would lend money and charge interest, some as much as 240% interest. So, you know, if let's say let's just for simplicity purposes, let's say your trip would cost you $100, you would have to pay back 240% of that $100, which is roughly, I think it's 240 extra dollars. So a lot of money was being made on banks. Indian merchants start to live abroad and take the Indian culture with them, and also as a result, Hinduism and Buddhism spread. Now, you know, one last thing, don't think so narrow-mindedly. A lot of this was already being done, traded globally, well, the known world. Some people believe that India and China were trading with the western side of the United States and South America 1,000 years before Columbus. And we'll get into that later. Thank you.